Although the Brazilians enjoy the world's 8th largest and still growing economy, a diverse cultural stew, the continent's best standard of living, and one of the planet's greatest ecosystems, they are known by most as the ultimate party animals and football wizards. However justified that preconception might be today, Brazil's past has been anything but a carnival. In fact, most of it has been unrelentingly harsh. When the Pope decided to divide the New World in the Treaty of Tordesillas of 1494, as it happened the bulge in South America fell on the eastern Portuguese side. It was the only thing that Portugal got out of the treaty, but it wasn't something petty. Legend says that the land was claimed by Pedro Cabral in April 1500, when the fleet he was leading down the African coast and around the Cape of Good Hope was borne so far westward that he made landfall in South America by mistake. When he arrived, some 2,000 native, termed Indios, tribes inhabited the coast and Amazon basin. Semi-nomadic, these folk main activities were hunting, fishing, foraging, tribal warfare, and cannibalism. Since it was obvious the natives weren't going to do anything with the rich land and were certainly not good Christians, the first Portugal immigrants began to stake claims in 1532. The discovery of Brazil wood, a dense orange-red hardwood prized in dye making and in the making of musical instruments and furniture, incited the crown's interest. In 1534, King Dom João III encouraged more private colonial ventures. In 1549, the king appointed a governor and Brazil officially became a Portuguese colony. In wars with the French, the Portuguese slowly expanded their holdings to the north and south, taking Rio de Janeiro in 1567 and São Luís in 1615. In 1680, they claimed the lands around the Rio de la Plata, which became their southernmost territory. In the meantime, British and Dutch strongholds in the Amazon interior were overrun. As was the case throughout the Americas, the Indios were either assimilated, enslaved, or exterminated. The settling of Brazil was certainly a dangerous affair. Tens of thousands of Indios died from European diseases. Thousands of Europeans died of native fevers. The interior was hot and humid, mostly jungle and swamp, broken by turgid rivers, where the slightest scratch could mean a lingering death. If one wasn't shot by contending colonists or eaten by the angry natives, much of the flora and fauna were poisonous or hungry, from mosquitoes to caiman. Then there were the tales of giant snakes that could crush you, or fish that could strip the flesh from the bones. Nevertheless, the stubborn Portuguese kept pushing inland, establishing outposts and plantations along the river banks. By the end of the 17th century, Brazil was the largest and most important of Portugal's scattered colonies. Besides Brazil wood, other major exports included sugarcane, dyes and spices. The Portuguese began their import of slaves from Africa to meet the growing international demand for these commodities. Eventually, Portugal would become one of the major slave trading nations, and slaves in Brazil would number in hundreds of thousands. Why die any number of unpleasant ways, hacking a profit out of the jungle, when someone else could do the work for almost nothing? Concurrently, prospectors sought in vain for gold in the jungles and hills of Brazil, until extensive deposits were discovered in Minas Gerais. Along the coast, port cities grew, Rio, Recife, Maceió, Fortaleza and others, to ship all this wealth out. They became the cultural centers of the colony, with churches, schools, concert halls, taverns, houses of ill repute, and all the other trappings of civilization. Into this poured the hopeful from the old country, and then in 1808, the Portuguese royal family and its government ministers showed up in Rio de Janeiro, since they had managed to lose their homeland to Napoleon Bonaparte. The Prince Regent João, ruling in the stead of his mother Maria I, which was incapacitated due to mental illness, re-established the Portuguese capital in Rio and ruled the empire from there. While in residence, he founded a royal library, a military academy, a royal mint, a printing office, and medical and law schools. In 1815, João declared Brazil a kingdom, co-equal with Portugal in the empire. Following the defeat of France, he wanted to remain in Brazil, until called back to Portugal to deal with the radical rebels. In April 1821, João appointed his son Pedro to the regency. Pedro's ministers, mostly Brazilian-born, urged independence once the Portuguese army was gone. The young regent issued a declaration of independence for Brazil in September 1822 and was crowned Emperor Pedro I with unseemly haste. In 1825, the Portuguese government reluctantly, although there wasn't much they could do about the situation, recognized Brazil's sovereignty, and within the year, even the most stubborn European monarch followed the suit. Pedro I was increasingly embroiled in affairs in Portugal, and in 1831 abdicated in favor of his 5-year-old son, Pedro II, so he could return to Portugal to reclaim the family throne. The new emperor's 5-decade reign was enlightened and progressive, and Brazil enjoyed a golden age in every realm: politically, economically, industrially, socially, culturally, becoming almost continental in its refinement and attitude. Under Pedro II, Brazil won 3 wars, expanded its international reputation, modernized, reformed its legal and monetary systems, boosted its agricultural diversity, and abolished slavery. After Pedro II, who was deposed by bloodless military coup in 1889, for the next century Brazil was governed by a series of dictators or military juntas, with an occasional fling at democracy that was soon ended by another ambitious general. At the end, General Ernesto Giselle assumed the presidency in 1974 and surprisingly launched a slow, gradual and safe policy of returning rule to a democratic government. Over several years, he ended the torture of political prisoners, censorship of the press, and finally the junta itself. His successor continued the process, and in 1985 the first free elections were held. The country of Brazil occupies roughly half of the South America. It is ranked 5th in the world by the size of its territory. The Atlantic coastline extends 7,367 kilometers and land border is 15,719 kilometers long. The only South American countries with which Brazil does not share borders are Chile and Ecuador. 90% of the territory is within the tropical zone. The largest river in Brazil and the second longest in the world is the Amazon. Amazon rainforest is the largest rainforest in the world and has unparalleled biodiversity. 1 in 10 known species in the world lives in the Amazon rainforest. Among them you can find jaguar, anaconda, piranha, electric eel and poison frogs. The biodiversity in the Amazon is becoming increasingly threatened, primarily by habitat loss from deforestation as well as increased frequency of fires. Brazil is a federation composed of 26 states and a federal district. It is a federal presidential constitutional republic based on representative democracy. It is the only country in the Americas where Portuguese is an official language. With some 211 million people in 2023, Brazil is the world's 7th most populous country. Its capital is Brasilia, and its most populous cities are São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. Most of the people live on the east. Brazil is among the world's most multicultural and ethnically diverse nations due to over a century of mass immigration from around the world. About 18 million of Brazil's population is white, 92 million are mixed, 21 million are black, 1 million Asian, and 1 million indigenous. About 89% of population is Christians, of which 65% Roman Catholic. The total gross domestic product of Brazil, according to World Bank for 2023, is $2,173 billion, which places Brazil in the 8th place in the world. GDP per capita from the same source is about $8,900, which makes Brazil the 78th richest country in the world by that perimeter. Brazil's most severe problem today is arguably its highly unequal distribution of wealth and income, one of the most extreme in the world, but also corruption and crime. In 2024, according to Forbes, Brazil was the 7th largest country in the world by number of billionaires. Brazil is one of the 10 chief industrial states in the world, with industry accounting for around 28% of Brazil's GDP. The country is very rich in natural resources. Brazil is a big producer of iron, copper and gold. Defense and creative industries are growing in the last years, while biggest companies in Brazil are the ones in banking business. Tourism is still underdeveloped, since Brazil, with all its potentials, is only 48th the most visited country, with 6.6 million tourists. Brazil is the world's largest producer of sugarcane, soy, coffee and orange. It is one of the top 5 producers of tobacco, pineapple, banana, cotton, beans, coconut, watermelon and lemon. In 2019, the country was the world's largest exporter of chicken meat. It was also the 2nd largest producer of beef, the world's 3rd largest producer of milk, the world's 4th largest producer of pork, and the 7th largest producer of eggs in the world. Brazil created and expanded a complex agribusiness sector. However, some of this is at the expense of the environment, including the Amazon. Brazilian prisoners are allowed to reduce their sentence by 4 days for every book that they read. But there is a catch. Only 12 books per year counts, so it is 48 days per year max. The authorities also test them, as they have to write essays on their reading materials, where the authorities judge the correct use of language and grammar. So a lot of children would agree that there is no difference between school and prison. Brazil's capital, Brasilia, looks like an aeroplane from above, or maybe a bird. Voting in Brazil is compulsory. According to the constitution, voting is an obligation for anyone over the age of 18 and an option for anyone between 16 to 18 or over the age of 70 and anyone who is illiterate. You must vote unless you are sick, away from your domicile, or in civil or military service. Failure to vote without justification is subject to penalty. You can be fined between 3 to 10% of the local minimum salary, and you'll be prohibited from getting a passport or ID or obtaining a public sector job. As you can see, in Brazil, voting is not a choice. Brazil is the world's largest coffee producer, supplying around a third of the world's coffee. Behind Brazil are Vietnam and Colombia. United States is leading as the largest consumer of coffee, followed by Brazil and Germany. Brazil is home to the largest population of Japanese people outside Japan, with about 1.5 million Japanese and their descendants. At the beginning of the 20th century, Japan was overpopulated, and due to the expansion of coffee plantations, which were the major driver of the Brazilian economy, there was a demand for cheap workforce in rural Sao Paulo. Brazil was the first country to accept women in their armed forces. Brazil's national drink is known as caipirinha, and it is delicious. In 2016, At least 49 people were murdered in Brazil defending the environment against companies or landowners. The largest Art Deco statue in the world, Cristo Redentor, Christ the Redeemer, stands atop Corcovado Mountain, 700 meters above Rio de Janeiro, keeping a watchful eye on the sinners of that city. With arms spread wide to embrace the cities sprawling below in spectacular disorder, the statue of Christ stands 30 meters tall, with the arms measuring 28 meters from fingertip to fingertip. Construction began in 1922 and the monument opened to the public in October 1931. It is considered as one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Brazil is the most successful national team in the FIFA World Cup, being crowned winner 5 times: 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994 and 2002. The Seleção also has the best overall performance in the World Cup competition, both in proportional and absolute terms, with a record of 76 victories in 114 matches played, 129 goal difference, 247 points and only 19 losses. It is the only national team to have played in all World Cup editions without any absence. Brazil has developed many rivalries through the years, with the most notable one being with Argentina, known as the Super Clásico das Américas. Pelé, Zito, Garrincha, Vava, Jairzinho, Rivelino were ruling the football world during 50s to 70s. Me personally remember the 80s stars like Zico and Socrates, although there was no World Cup trophy for them. Second golden age for Brazil football waited for Romário and Bebeto in 90s, and then for 3 Rs, Ronaldo, Rivaldo and Ronaldinho, which led Brazil to win its 5th championship at the 2002 World Cup held in South Korea and Japan. After that, since 2006, Brazil is, by their standards, in the World Cup drought. Neymar is Brazil's all-time top scorer with 79 goals. The football stadium Maracanã is a part of a large complex in the heart of Rio de Janeiro. Begun in 1948, after Brazil had won the right to host the FIFA World Cup, it was opened for the first matches in that contest in 1950. Unfortunately, heavily favored Brazil was upset in the final by the team from Uruguay 2-1 before a crowd of 200,000 rabid fans, making it the world's largest and loudest stadium at the time, and match is usually seen as the most highly attended football match ever played. Having been renovated to a smaller capacity of 79,000, the stadium hosted the Summer Olympics in 2016. The Carnival in Rio de Janeiro is considered the biggest street carnival in the world and the most spectacular party on the planet, with 2 million people per day on the streets. Parades, concerts, performances, masks, along with liberal amounts of alcohol fuel the celebrations. The typical Rio Carnival parade is filled with the revelers and adornments from numerous samba schools which are located in Rio. What have Brazilians ever done for us? We must learn from them, because only Brazilians really know how to cast care to the wind during such festivals. I hope you find this video interesting and of some value for you. Please excuse my Tarzan English and please like, share and subscribe.